daily soccer podcast with the Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Newcastle podcast. I am your host, Michael Grahamslaw, and I was due to be joined by Ian Mackay for today's episode, but he managed to grab himself a ticket at the last minute for the game. And, well, he's actually in the stadium as I record this. Yes, I'm still recording this at about 4:55. So, for those in level 7, they're probably only about halfway out the stadium by now. But that means you get your instant reaction from Newcastle United's victory over Wolverhampton Wanderers, which was a little bit tighter than many expected, or almost identical to how I called it yesterday. Just without the Wolves goal, let's say. To start off, I'll talk about the lineup. It was a pretty bold call from Eddie Howe to keep Anthony Elanga on the bench, start Jacob Murphy and Harvey Barnes. But if you recall from yesterday's preview with the boys, I said I wanted this exact lineup for Newcastle United. Woltemade through the middle, 2 established wingers on either side of him. And I think it's one of those, this isn't anything against Elanga, but I think if we'd had Wilson or Isak, I'd be comfortable starting Elanga because realistically, you need to embed these players into the squad to get them working in cohesion. Particularly if you play the way that Newcastle United do. For me, the only real issue with the lineup was before today, there wasn't a single winger who had justified starting for Newcastle United this season. All 4 if you include Anthony Gordon, had been quite poor. Now, Elanga's got the excuse, he's just joined. But Murphy and Barnes, we were definitely expecting a lot more in the opening 3 games. But now they have a new striker to aim for. You were thinking maybe, just maybe, that would inspire them to a bit of a better performance. And spoiler, it did just that. I will say at the start of the game, Wolves were the better team in the opening stages. Both Wang Yi-chan and Joe Gomez forced Nick Pope into good saves. And I think basically on the way to Newcastle, Wolves had just played Ian Mackay saying they were a nothing team and absolutely terrible, had no threat to us whatsoever on the bus. And they went, you know what, we're going to try and score within 13 seconds, which would have been the quickest goal at St James's Park, beating Shearer's record. So thank God that didn't happen. But yeah, ultimately, they were toothless in the end. But at the start, we were starting to think there was potentially going to be a tough game. We started quite slowly. Wolves seemed to have tons of space to move the ball forward. And that press was excellent. But realistically, that kind of only lasted for about 5 minutes. Again, excellent for the opening 5, but then they started to drop back a little bit. They gave Newcastle a bit more time on the ball, and Newcastle started to pass the ball around. And, we didn't see the best of Newcastle. Our best attacks came from our own press, which, again, we didn't really start with. But once we got a hold of the ball, and then, even when we gave it away, we were on them like a flash. Getting a lot better as the game gone on. But for the first 30 minutes, it was fairly 50-50, I would say. Shaw and Byrne both made excellent defensive contributions to stop Wolves getting in behind. And as for our front line, if you haven't noticed it today, you will notice it against Barcelona. When you watch Nick Woltemade, just keep an eye on how alert he is to second balls. There are a few moments in that first half where you're watching, and before we've even lost that 50-50 duel, Woltemade has already made a movement to collect the ball where he thinks it's going to end up, and that's really impressive to me. Not something you see a 6'6" player do really ever. So that was really impressive in my opinion from him across most of the game. That sort of slowed down a little bit in the second half, but hopefully just, we can keep that going into Barcelona. Came off probably as a precaution just to keep him fit because he probably will have to play 90 minutes on Thursday. But the first controversial moment of the game comes when the ball is played behind. I do have to say it's an excellent run by Harvey Barnes to get in behind. and the Wolves defender Mosquera just gets the wrong side of Barnes and takes him out with a little bit of a combination of an elbow and an arm to the face. I'm not quite sure how VAR hasn't given a red card. I don't know. I think the end decision, and I will probably read about this in 10 minutes' time and understand. But I think the end decision was that Barnes wasn't in a position that was a clear goal scoring opportunity, as in there were defenders that could get back or would get back, in their opinion. Now, for me, I think an arm and an elbow to the face, when you're looking straight at the player and not at the ball, is a red card anyways. But we have seen too many red cards in our opening three or four games. So it was quite nice to not have one brandished today and have that impact the game. It was good just seeing 11 versus 11. How did Newcastle fare? But yeah, for me, that it should have been a red card, and I'm glad it didn't impact the result in the end. The deadlock is finally broken by Newcastle, and it's the only goal of the game. I did go on record a few pods ago and say with the service we were giving Asula, a player with proper striker's instincts will get goals, and this one just proves my point. Jacob Murphy whips in a delightful cross, similar to one that was put in for Joe Linton earlier in the game, but Sam Johnston did well there. And similar to what we've seen, I believe it was pre-season against Atletico Madrid, where those crosses are coming in, and it was Joe Linton on the end of 4 of them, and he could have had 3 goals, but every single one of them went either off target or straight at the goalkeeper. This doesn't look like it's going to happen with the new German striker Woltemade, who this time the ball comes in over Johnson's head. He's coming to the back post to try and make himself big, like he did for Murphy earlier in the game, where there's a great save to deny him. But Woltemade just rises, he's leaning back, but somehow manages to get the power to smash it beyond Johnson at the back post. It's an absolutely fantastic header, and Newcastle led the game then thanks to the BFG. And no, I ain't talking about the kids' book. But from then on, Newcastle had the better of the first half, a number of chances to double the lead, long-range efforts from Jacob Murphy, which went narrowly wide, and Sandro Tonali. The former was because of great defensive work from Nick Woltemade, and the latter hitting the post after dummying the Wolves defender. And it's a great strike from both of them. And I think with the Jacob Murphy one, if that does hit the back of the net, they're going to have to replace the net afterwards, because it was an absolute corker of a strike. And then just before the end in between those two incidents, actually, we nearly made it 2-0. Was offside. Jacob Murphy's the one that puts the ball in the back of the net. Great composure when he gets the ball to just stop, analyse what's in front of him, and just put it into the roof of the net. Maybe something similar to what Asula should have done against Leeds. But again, can't keep criticising that one moment from Asula. It's not really that fair on the young lad. But Woltemade, I feel like I've mentioned him in every sentence I've said so far, 100 times in 8 minutes, something like that. But he chips the ball over the defender, finds Harvey Barnes, gets the byline, pulls it back to Jacob Murphy, and again, puts it in the back of the net. Now, it is offside from Harvey Barnes, whether you think it's Barnes that mistimes the run, or Woltemade he's a bit slow with the pass. Either way, just slightly mistimed, and that will come while the two play with each other more often. It is going to be Anthony Gordon there, probably on Thursday, and probably more often in the future. But as they start to get a better understanding, you might just see moves like that a lot more. But yeah, that's pretty much it from the first half. A great end to the first half from Newcastle. Started very slowly, grew into it, but we were so much the better team in that first half. Would that continue in the second? Well, we'll get to that, but not before Bionic.
Your body is unique. And Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bionic, the world's most personalised supplements. Bionic provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bionic. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now.
So in the second half, Newcastle start again on the front foot, but they don't really force Sam Johnson into a save at all. There was one thing I immediately noticed from us, and not a lot happens in the second half, so I am just going to go into more things I noticed from the overall game. Newcastle on set pieces, if we don't take it short, even if the opposition tend to put 3 players on Dan Burn, we will still try and loft it to Dan Burn. Now, I feel like we brought in a set-piece coach to avoid doing that, but it kind of felt like it was our only approach every single time Wolves blocked the short corner. So that was something that was a little disappointing. It will take longer to see the benefits from the set-piece coach, etc., but was hoping to sort of see a couple of things here and there. And then literally nothing happens until about the 60th minute. And even though Wolves had done nothing in the first half, you are starting to think we're going to have to be inch perfect at the back because we need that second goal. And all it takes is one mistake to lose the 3 points here. You're thinking maybe get a Langer on, maybe Lewis Hall. And then a huge 5 changes came in the game. 2 of them from Newcastle. William Asula came on for Woltemade, and Joe Willock came on for Joe Linton. But it wasn't really the changes people wanted. In the end, they were probably smart changes because Joe Linton's going to need to be fit. He's just coming back from an injury. We need him to be fit against Barcelona, and Nick Woltemade is our only striker. We're elite in the game. Let's sort of keep him fit for Barcelona as well. Wolves also made 3 changes. John Arias and Munetzi came on alongside, I believe it was Bellegarde. Munetzi and Arias were 2 players we expected to start the game from our research on Wolves before the match. But they made 5 changes from the loss against Everton. Clearly, they wanted to change something. They started brightly, but ultimately, it kind of felt like Wolves just fell back into their own ways. And then Wolves pick up another 2 yellow cards after the changes in about 30 seconds. I will say they're a lot dirtier of a team than I remember the last time we played them, but credit to them for showing a little bit of bite because, I'll be honest, bottom of the table, it's easy for teams to feel sorry for themselves. They were fighting for the badge. They did what they could. Even though second half, they were a little toothless. It seems like they're reading directly from the Jose Mourinho book of, I don't want to say trickery, but it is that way. Every time there was a slight knock, particularly to the head, it's straight at the floor, play gets broken up. And I'm sure on occasion there was issues. Ball hits you in the face. I think we all know how that feels if we've ever played football. But it kind of just felt like every single opportunity they got, they was slowing the game down. And then it took about 75 minutes before the second half 30 minutes into the second half. But 75 minutes into the game before Wolves really started to attack again. We never really looked shaky, but we lacked any threat at all after Woltemade came off. And that's really concerning. And to emphasise how counter-attacking we were looking to go, we then brought on Alanga, who I thought should have come on 15 minutes earlier. But we just looked to simply utilise his pace where we could. And then we dropped not 10 men behind the ball, but it was pretty close at times. And when you play like that, a bit more defensive, your players start to take longer to release the ball. And it's ultimately quite disappointing if you're playing bottom of the league. But we did hold on. It was a decent performance. And in the end, we've got 3 clean sheets in 4 games, which is extremely positive. However, it does have to be said, where if we see too many of those kinds of games this season, we're going to drop points in games where we shouldn't. And we weren't lucky not to today because Wolves were ultimately poor in attack. We nullified them very, very well. It seems to be defensively where they have issues rather than up top. They were missing Strand Larson though. But yeah, it's one of those where there will be games like that. I can imagine Everton being the team off the top of my head who would punish you like that. And particularly when we give away silly fouls on the edge of the box like we did towards the end today, there will be a team that punishes you. But it wasn't today. We got the 3 points we needed at home after a poor start of the campaign against Wolves. And ultimately, that kind of sounds a little familiar because if you remember, it was exactly the same last season. We had a little bit of a difficult start to the campaign. We played Wolves, and then we had two absolutely fantastic strikes, one from Harvey Barnes, one from Fabian Schär, and we came out the winners. And although it wasn't the result that changed our season, it was what we needed to kickstart it and get things going. So hopefully it's the same today. In part 3, I'm going to go into my individual player ratings, but for now, I'm going to read out the advert from Zencastr. So, here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we have spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform, and Zencastr came out a clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it is super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. Good stuff. So we go into our player ratings. It is very weird doing an advert and then going straight back into talking. Those are the times where we probably do need the recorded ones if we don't use them in the future. 100%. Note to anyone on the pod who is listening. But yes, that probably should have been a side note. But player ratings, I'm going to do them live off the top of my head. As I say, the match finished literally 5 minutes before I've gone up and done this. I haven't had time to write much, haven't had time to do anything. But over the course of the game, I've obviously known I was going to do this, so I've made a few mental notes. But start with Nick Pope, and it's probably going to be the highest rating I've gave Nick Pope since, let's think, the AC Milan game, maybe. Where we got absolutely battered at the San Siro, but kept a 0-0. There probably is higher one since, but I've gave him an 8.5 for once. Probably a bit harsh saying for once, but his passing was decent today. He made one absolutely incredible save and a couple of very, very good saves. For me, it was one of his better games in recent memory. And if anyone was thinking Aaron Ramsdale might start against Barcelona and that'll be the game we have a bit of rotation, I don't think there's any chance of that after this performance from Nick Pope. Fantastic. And there's a reason he's in the middle of our goal. Kieran Trippier, I'm going to give 7. Probably a bit harsh enough to give him a 7.5. He was at the centre of a lot of things we did today. Every attack seemed to go through Trippier at one point. But I thought he was caught lacking at some crucial moments defensively, particularly in the first half. He's a calm and composed player on the ball, but looked a bit shaky defensively. He did improve a lot in the second half. I thought he was solid. Probably could have pushed him up to a 7.5, but I'll keep him at a 7. Just because first half, there was 2 moments where he was beaten comfortably and we could have ended up behind because of that. And then Fabian Schär and Dan Burn. If I'm going from right to left, I'll start with Fabian Schär. Fabian Schär, I'm going to give an 8. He battled mostly against what I would say is unknown opposition. I believe it's Arokade, the new signing for Wolves. It's one of those, I knew nothing about him going into the game. It's why we didn't speak about him yesterday, and I didn't think he'd be thrown in straight away. But he looked dangerous, the big centre forward. But Fabian Schär matched him physically, His passing was fantastic. He was brilliant at the back. And there was a number of times where when Wolves were looking to get through, Fabian Schär just got his foot on the ball, won it back, and played it out for Newcastle. So very good. Distribution great. Defending even better. Age seems to have made Fabian Schär a much better defender, because I remember not that long ago, well, I say not that long ago, a while back we were saying, he can't defend at all, but he can pass a ball and he can strike a ball. Defending's actually become one of his best elements, which is a big surprise. And then Dan Burn, I'm probably harsh here, but I'm going to give Dan Burn a 7. It was somewhat similar to Fabian Schär. He didn't do anything wrong, as per se, from the opening minute to the last. But the reason I'm going to say that is because Newcastle's set piece threat, if we're going to have any at all, means Dan Burn has to do better from corners. Every set piece seems to go to him, and every defence puts 2-3 players on him. It's one of those where he's always going to struggle. And for me, when he did win the initial ball, almost every knockdown went to a Wolves player. Now, whether that's our attackers not being alert enough to get to the ball, in some cases it probably was, but it felt like a lot of the knockdowns went straight to Wolves players' feet. And being harsh, because that's attacking for a defender, he probably could have got a 7.5 as well. But for me, it's a 7. And then Tino Livramento, I'm going to give a 6.5. He has been our best player so far this season, but he wasn't at that level today. He hasn't managed to do much on the ball at all. I think he struggled against Hugo Bueno. It was Hugo Bueno. In one-on-one duels, I think Bueno beat him a number of times. And I didn't see the Tino Livramento that really affects the game and gets himself forward like I normally do. But if that's one of his worst games for us across the season, he's going to be one of the best in the world, because it wasn't a bad performance at all. It was a fairly standard performance, but it was the worst we've seen of him so far, and that includes in England colours. So fantastic, really, when you look at it from the outside, but just wasn't great today. And then, speaking of wasn't great today, Bruno Guimaraes, I could probably give a 6.5 if I wanted to be generous, but I am going to give him a 6. For a player that has so much passion, he couldn't really stamp any sort of authority on the ball and off the ball, really. All the joy Wolves were having in the first half seemed to come from his side. And it just felt like it was really easy for Wolves to bundle him off the ball. I don't know if it's because of him coming back from Brazil duty late. I mentioned yesterday Chelsea was saying they might not start João Pedro because of the same reason. And, it's one of those where if you're in attacking duels or defensive duels in midfield throughout the entire game, that kind of stuff does have a huge impact on you. I didn't hate what I saw today, so 6 is probably a bit harsh. Whether stats back that up, stats will probably end up saying he had a great game, but my eyes sort of said otherwise. So that's why I've gave him that. Probably wasn't at 100%, and I'm confident because he has been good so far this season. We'll probably see him back to his best against Barcelona. And to be honest, I've got no doubts we'll see him back to his best against Barcelona. Sandro Tonali will be next. Sandro Tonali, I'm going to give a 7.5. It was quite similar to Bruno in the first half. He didn't get himself into the game too much, but the difference between the two was that with Tonali you saw individual moments of brilliance at times. He wasn't his authoritative self off the ball in that first half, but did give us a bit of quality when we needed it. Second half, we controlled the game without really doing too much. We controlled the tempo. Tonali was a huge part of that. And then when we needed to defend in the last 15 minutes, Tonali was at the heart of pretty much everything defensively. So, yeah, it was not a fantastic first half, grew into the game, and by the end was very decent. Joe Linton is then the third central midfielder. To be honest, Joe Linton didn't really have his usual game today, actually. I don't remember him doing all that much. I think he was on the ball probably more than usual. So I'm gonna give him a 6.5. I feel like when he was on the ball, he was quite loose. He got amongst the game? There was a few tackles that went in. Sometimes a bit clumsy. Won the ball. From, again, similar to I mentioned Nick Woltemade earlier in the game, those 50-50s, he's very good at just picking up the loose balls in those moments. He did win a number of defensive battles, and I think he was probably one of the catalysts in us gaining control of the game midway. Just every time Wolves seemed to get on the ball, he was there or thereabouts. I'm gonna give him a 6.5. I was stalling a bit for time there because I didn't really know how it was going to go. But I do think 6.5 is probably closest. It wasn't a bad game. Wasn't a good game. It's just what we've come to expect from Joe Linton. Very solid, but nothing to write home about. And then things to write home about, probably the best performance from a winger this season so far, which, to be fair, there's not much competition. Worth saying for Newcastle. Definitely not best in the league. But Jacob Murphy, I'm going to give him a 7.5, which just tells you how bad some of the other winger appearances have been this year. He got the assist for the goal, had a couple of good chances to score. If Barnes or Woltemade were a little bit quicker to react, he probably would have had a goal himself. Didn't do anything really wrong at all today. Crossing was good, very solid, helped out defensively. Again, not something you're going to write home about, but a very good performance, and probably means Jacob Murphy's guaranteed to start against Barcelona for me. On the other wing, Harvey Barnes, I think the only player today who potentially could have played himself out of appearing against Barcelona was Harvey Barnes. I really want him to do well in a Newcastle shirt, but I just don't think it's going to happen. He just doesn't seem to click with players the same way that Murphy and Gordon do. He wasn't terrible today by any stretch of the imagination. Just when he was attempting things, they just weren't coming off. And I'm not the first to say this. When Barnes doesn't get a goal or assist, there's very little he does end up doing in the game. There was a great cross in the first half, which just goes over Woltemade's head, but there should have been someone coming in at the back post. I say it was a great cross. It was a good cross. It probably should have been a bit further out, so the winger could have got on the end of it a bit easier. But yeah, crossing was okay. It was decent. Shooting was very poor. And again, if Barnes doesn't score or assist, he tends to be pretty poor. So he is going to get probably the worst of the players that started, which will be a 6. Yeah, I just wasn't impressed by Barnes today, unfortunately. But there is time for him to get that form that he had last season when Gordon was suspended and then couldn't get back in the team. So hopefully we see that side of Harvey Barnes again, because I really do want him to do well in a Newcastle shirt. And then the final player who started, well, the BFG himself, Nick Woltemade. I've give him an 8.5. Yeah, I'm going to give him an 8.5. And this isn't a dig at strikers of Newcastle's past, but I don't recall any Newcastle strikers working as hard off the ball as Nick Woltemade does. And there is a chance that was just debut adrenaline, and it's not how he does every game. I'll be honest, I wasn't exactly a frequent viewer of Stuttgart last season, so I can't say for certain. But if that's how hard he works every single game, and he still gets goals, he'll be adored at St. James's Park, because that was an absolutely fantastic performance. It did a lot to help the team out, and I think he would be absolutely excellent in a good old-fashioned 4-4-2, because he brings players into the game so much. First half, first touch passing. You think first debut appearance at St. James's Park, he's going to be a bit nervous. Almost every pass, just first touch, straight out. Fantastic. Brilliant debut from the big man. And he probably would have been man of the match if it wasn't for Nick Pope's heroics in the first half. Another player who, I think Pope, because he's been scrutinised a lot, I think when he does put in those fantastic games, it does have to be recognised. But Woltemade as well. The two Nicks, both fantastic for me today. And then for the substitutes, I'm not sure who. I think it was just Osula and Willock who were on for longer than 15 minutes. I'm not going to rate players on less than 15 minutes. And Osula and Willock for me were both 5.5s. I don't think either had any real impact on the game, and our attacking threat, to say it died when they came off was probably a poor term of phrase, but there was really nothing there when those two came on. And if Wolves just went, let's say, 6 or 7 players in attack and left the 4 back, I'd be somewhat confident that we wouldn't score. So yeah, it is a worry. Hopefully Johan Wissa's injury isn't too bad. I would have liked to have seen Osula go out on loan so he can sort of improve that area of his game, because I've mentioned before, there is a player in there. It's just he needs to learn when to be that enthusiastic striker and when to just calm things down a bit. And Willock, it was Willock's first appearance. I think he was coming back from an injury or a knock that he picked up. Wasn't great, but we haven't seen the best of Joe Willock for a little while now. It's just good to get minutes in the legs for him, I guess. And hopefully we get enough minutes in the legs where we start to see that great player again. Because, there is one in there. We're just not seeing it often enough. But there you've had it. It's a much-needed 3 points for Newcastle United. The game was extremely tight, just as I said it would be yesterday. I didn't quite believe the 3-0 and 4-0 that Ian and Kev were going for. I couldn't believe my ears when I was hearing it, as you could probably tell by my reactions. But exactly as I thought it would be. I did think Wolves would have a bit more oomph in attack. I didn't think we'd be as solid as we were defensively, and I think more than anything else, I was just surprised, very surprised we managed to keep 3 clean sheets in 4 games, which is a very positive thing. And when you look at the game we conceded 3, the XG for Liverpool was only like 0.65 or something like that. So very solid defensively. If we're going to do anything this season, we'll probably need to be. But the result is all that matters. We're out of the relegation. Well, we're 17th. We're out of the relegation picture, should we say. And as it stands, I believe we're in 9th. Yes, we're in 9th. 4 games played, 1 win, 2 draws, 1 loss. Ultimately, you would have liked to have had at least 7 points from the opening 4 games, but we take it, we move on, and hopefully we do just as well at the weekend and on Thursday. Bring on Barcelona.
Your daily soccer podcast with the Global Sports Podcast Network.